Hello, my name is Leah Bordelin. I am a strategic coordinator for the Center for Corporate Sustainability. On behalf of Haskayne School of Business, I would like to welcome you to the Center for Corporate Sustainability's Enbridge Research and Action Seminar entitled The Future of Oil and Gas, International Perspectives and Wisdom from Indigenous Women. Today, we have a discussion with two Indigenous panelists, Jessica Vandenberg and Rayleen Whitford. Today, we're so grateful to have them join us on National Indigenous Peoples Day. We're also extremely honored to welcome and invite Elder Evelyn Day to open us up with a land acknowledgement and a blessing, and to have Jessica Vandenberg open us up with a smudge. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Leah, and good morning or good afternoon, depending where you're joining us from. I'm going to assist Elder Evelyn Day with the smudge. And so for those of you unfamiliar with smudge, it is something we engage in as Indigenous people to offer our thoughts and our prayers to Creator. We use all natural products. So I have with me my abalone shell that was gotten in a good way with prayer and blessed. And I'm utilizing today sage that was also gifted to me and gathered in a good way with tobacco laid down and thoughts of good things going into the gathering of the sage. I'm utilizing wooden matches, so all natural products. And I don't blow on it with my breath. I'm utilizing my feathers that I have gotten in a good way as well. These are from a Canadian goose, and there's a lot of teachings that go into Canadian geese around creating community and the leadership, how they govern themselves. There's a lot that we can learn from teachings of the birds, for sure. And so I'm going to assist with this. I'm going to light my smudge here. And if you do also, you're welcome to join in and smudge in your own house if you have the items available and want to join in from where you're sitting as well. So I'm just going to light mine up here. And for me, what smudge means, it's a way to ground myself, a way to offer my thoughts into the universe and back to Mother Nature and to all my relations, a way to start things off in a good way. And so I have it lit here. And the smoke carries our thoughts and prayers up to Creator. And I use it to bless myself. So I want to open my mind to the thoughts that are being shared today. I want to come in a respectful manner. I want to be able to see all of you and see myself in a good way. I want to be able to hear good thoughts. I want to be able to really listen to what's being shared today and really let it in. I want to be able to speak good words and come in a respectful manner and really work towards understanding and calming understanding as we work towards reciprocity. I want to open my heart to respect, to love, to kindness, curiosity, compassion, and I want to release all of those bad feelings that sometimes sneak in there when we're not focusing in a good way. I want to release any feelings of shame or blame or guilt or fear or disgust or sadness. I want those to be taken away and Mother Earth to take those back so I can leave that room again for that respect, that we come in a good way with each other today. And I just want to offer my own prayer that this finds you safe and healthy, especially during these pandemic times. And that as the bodies of residential school survivors are being found across the country, that those spirits find their way home, back to Creator, back to where they're meant to be, where they can find peace, and that our thoughts are with their families, that they also find comfort, know that they're not alone, and that this isn't their fault. This isn't Indigenous people's fault, and that we want to support them in their healing. So my thoughts are going out to them as well. So again, I just want to open this in a good way with a smudge. And it's always an honor to be able to sit with Elder Evelyn and stand beside her and learn from her. And so I'd like to hand it over to Elder Evelyn to continue opening this up in a good way.
Thank you, Medu. Medu in Tahltan language is thank you. I am from Telegraph Creek, BC. I'm Tahltan, Tlingit, Kiskan, and Métis. It's such a great honor to be here. I will acknowledge the land, go into a prayer, and then I have written, my helper, my husband Dave, he is here, we written something, and I will read that and then pass it on to the other ladies. So I will acknowledge the land. It is a great honor to be asked to acknowledge the people of this land. Dene, Cree, Stoney Nakoda, Sioux, Saulteaux, Ojibwe, and Métis people, and all the other people that I've never mentioned. From the bottom of our hearts, we thank them for sharing the land and welcome you with an open heart. We walk together respecting our differences spiritually as we walk on Mother Earth. We put our invisible weapons down that brings fear and separate us from each other. Understand that we are the keepers of the land and you are the keepers of the people. Despite all we have endured, we are still here carrying our bundles as you carry your cross. When we meet on the sacred road, please understand we are spiritual equals. Creator, Mother Earth, Great Spirit, Great Mystery, and my friend Jesus, we come into this circle of your wisdom and love. Creator, give us the grace to lay to heart the great dangers we are in by our unhappy divisions. Mother Earth, take away whatever hinder us from the spiritual union and strengthen the holy bonds of faith and unity. Great Spirit, help us to be led by your truth as we seek to love and serve one another. Great Mystery reached out to all with the 7 sacred teachings in my friend Jesus' story. And we left all the children that never made it home. We left them up to you. The story has been told. Our words, the ones who were in the residential school, have talked about it. Their words were truth. Be with them. Be with all the people. Bless them and hold them. And guide them. Guide their little spirit. You have them, and we thank you for that. We thank you for this time in this sacred circle we bring together to talk about the land, to talk about the people, to talk about the gifts that Mother Earth gives and how we need to walk with it in an open heart where she could help and heal for all of us to heal as we walk on her and talk about what she has given to us and how we need to honor all that. Be with each and every one of us. Bless us and bless our loved ones. And be with this circle in a very strong, spiritual, uplifting way for every heart to be open, for every heart to be truthful, for every mind to be open, and for every mind to heal what needs to be healed, to lead them closer to you, all of us, to be closer and to be in one spirit. We thank you. Medu, I, Megwich. Amen. Indigenous people asked for treaty in 1910 in BC. We have wanted 111 years to have Canada treat us fairly. The rules of law say our rights must be dealt with first before developing. This has not been done, so do not be surprised if you're not in a hurry. What do you have to offer us? We have been on this land for twice as long as your Bible. Ask the word started. All that time we have known one Creator. Our women have always been equal, and our property passed through their hands. All adults form our decisions by consensus. Your society is made up of a few winners and many losers. What do we have that you would want? You deal with our chiefs and council, but their bosses are in Ottawa. The traditional people rose up last year to say they were not treated fairly. You promised jobs for our people for 40 years. Indigenous people think of 1,000 years into the future. What returns can you bring us then? Give us then? Our king salmon no longer comes up our river and are soon to be an endangered species. What will we eat then? What would you eat? Your plans are timed with a stopwatch. What do you offer my people for 7 generations? We are the keepers of the land. We continue because of it and our part of the circle, just like the water, that 4-legged and the 2-legged, the trees and the rocks hear our voices and be gentle with the land and also with us. Understand culture differences when we walk together. That is important. And always remember, when I'm in the circle, there's always an invisible person, the Creator, Mother Earth, and the Great Spirit, the Great Mystery, and my friend Jesus' story. Thank you for listening. My heart to yours.
Thank you, Elder Evelyn, for opening us up in a good way and for your words. And thank you, Jessica, as well. As Jessica and Elder Evelyn have both said, we're all still grieving over the atrocities in Kamloops and across the country being rediscovered some weeks ago. And we offer you our love, and we continue to grieve for the children and the families and their community. And before we continue, I would like to honor the memory of David Lertzman. As Dr. Jim DeWald put it, David was our spiritual guide at Haskayne. He was our Indigenous connection and our sustainability hero. He was really excited that we were planning this session today. And David, we miss you dearly. David was a firm believer that business could play an important role in reconciliation. And he spoke a lot about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's Call to Action 92, about the role that business should take to ensure meaningful engagement, access to jobs, and the importance of education. And we hope that an event like this is one step in that direction. We're pleased to have Carrie Black join us today as the MC for our panel discussion. Carrie is non-Indigenous and is a strong advocate for increasing diversity in science and engineering and for developing sustainability initiatives and programs within Indigenous communities. She is an assistant professor and Schulich Research Chair in the Center for Environmental Engineering Research and Education and the Department of Civil Engineering at the University of Calgary. Her research focuses on building sustainable communities. Carrie speaks to the responsibility that non-Indigenous people have to walk the path toward reconciliation. And welcome, Carrie, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, and good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are currently located. I want to start first by thanking Elder Evelyn for opening us up in a good way, and for your prayers and your words, and to Jessica for offering the smudge this morning. We're in a virtual world, so as much as we've acknowledged the land, I want to take time for myself to acknowledge that I am currently located on the lands of Treaty 7 territory, and it's important for me to acknowledge that as a non-Indigenous person, because is this sacred gathering place that gives me the opportunity to engage in this discussion with you all and to demonstrate collectively our leadership towards reconciliation. So I want to thank you for your enthusiasm and commitment to be part of this conversation today. These are difficult conversations, but important. They're timely and yet also long overdue. And so today we're going to try and explore some very complicated conversations on this important day of National Indigenous Peoples Day, and with the recent news of Kamloops and Brandon, Manitoba, and what is soon to be many, many more residential schools. I encourage you to take the time to read all of the TRC calls to action, where you will find a lot of information that's really important for this journey towards reconciliation that we are all on. The history and present state, so it's not just the history, we often say our collective history, but it's also the present of that with Indigenous relationships, co-development, engagement is very complex. While it's rarely a rights-based conversation, oil and gas development has brought widespread attention and conversation around the importance of Indigenous rights. 40 years ago, that conversation might have looked very differently. Since then, there's been slow and subtle shifts that have led to increased recognition of the roles of Indigenous people on the activities in their lands and in the country's economic development. But in particular, the rapid expansion of this industry in the most recent century, in the 21st century, from our oil sands here in Alberta to BC's large shale deposits or the Northeast fields has shifted the conversation. And along with that, the role of oil and gas in Indigenous communities has also shifted and evolved over time. But it's not just unique to oil and gas. Obviously, these are conversations we have around mining and forestry, where we are typically discussing largely sparsely settled areas within Indigenous peoples' traditional territories. It tends to be in northern and remote regions. And these are regions that struggle with securing important opportunities for economic development. So these projects have become of even more crucial importance. There's widespread misunderstanding, often a lack of appreciation for the diversity and perspectives among Indigenous peoples and non-Indigenous peoples. And within communities, that has meant there's been fractured relationships, mistrust, and missed opportunities. There's also been meaningful collaboration and partnerships that have been established. There's support and opposition, there's agreement, and there's discord. Most recently, the impact of the UN Declaration, which many of you would have seen the success of that last week of Bill C-15, shows that we are likely at another tipping point for the ways in which we will choose to move forward, how we empower Indigenous communities, how we build pathways to prosperity, and how we rethink our collective role as non-Indigenous people in this space. And while the oil and gas industry has come a long way in acknowledging the importance of reconciliation in Canada and the role that it plays, the industry, in Indigenous self-determination and the growth of and health of well-being of Indigenous peoples, there's arguably a long way to go. So today, part of what we are exploring is the future, forward-looking, but in order to really understand the path forward, we also need to look in the past and our current present. It's an opportunity to position the industry grounded in respect and engagement, in ethics and in rights-based evolutions of governance. As a non-Indigenous person, this is a really important conversation for me to be a part of, and I'm honored to be able to facilitate a discussion between the two people that you actually came here to listen to, not myself, and I'm going to introduce them first. So first we have Jessica Vandenberg, a professional engineer. She's Dene Ta, born and raised in a very inclusive German family in Northern Alberta. She's had a long, exceptional career based on her 2 engineering degrees from the University of Alberta and has worked in the oil sands, mining, regulatory, infrastructure, and consulting industries. She's an Indigenous professional engineer, industrial professor, and the Assistant Dean of Outreach at the Faculty of Engineering at the University of Alberta. She also has her own consulting firm, Guided Star Consulting, where she contributes to truth and reconciliation, acting as a bridge to Indigenous communities, talks to calls to action implementation, and works on TRC awareness. She is a mother of 2 and is passionate about equity, diversity, and inclusion. She sits on many boards and councils, walks in many governance worlds, and does her best to contribute to the development of well-rounded, ethically minded engineering students who will ultimately build strong in vibrant communities within Canada. Welcome, Jessica. We also have joining us today Rayleen Whitford. Rayleen is Cree Métis finance professional with a well-established career in the international finance and energy sector. She's the founder of Native Energy, a social enterprise which supports the economic development of Indigenous communities impacted by the energy sector in Canada and Ecuador. Her previous leadership positions include being an executive director for a company listed on the London Stock Exchange and directing a $42 billion capital efficiency project for a national oil company in the Middle East. In 2014, Rayleen took a sabbatical from her corporate career with KPMG to return to Canada for a winter to roughneck on a triple pad drilling rig in order to gain experience in the field. She's currently a member of the Deputy Prime Minister's Women's Task Force for Economic Recovery and a member of the Indigenous Working Group for International Trade with Global Affairs Canada. She's also on the board of the Clean Resource Innovation Network. She's a chartered accountant, has an MBA in oil and gas management from Aberdeen Business School in Scotland, and is currently completing a PhD in Indigenous Studies in Business at the University of Alberta. Welcome, Rayleen. So we're going to start today by, again, focusing a little bit on where we are at right now in a Canadian context. So our collective present in Canada is complex. It's one of systematic oppression, colonization, trauma. Individuals, organizations, communities, government, and this industry is finding its way on the path towards reconciliation, many at different levels or points along that path, trying to answer the calls to action. I'm wondering, I'm going to go to Jessica first, if you can both speak to a little bit about the shift that you've seen in the oil and gas industry with regards to truth and reconciliation, and where you think companies might begin if they've not yet started on this path. Jessica?
Thanks so much, Carrie. The truth and reconciliation movement is quite slow, relatively speaking. I mean, settlers came to this land about 500 years ago. And since then, there's been a lot of oppression towards Indigenous peoples and communities. The oil and gas community and industry has grown a lot over the last 100 years or so, with a lot of exploration and extraction. But with many things, often industry is looking what other people are doing. No one is really taking a huge leadership role in it, but movement is coming along slowly. What we see are the regulators starting to put in a few minimal requirements, things like duty to consult. But the duty to consult, again, is very minimal, and it's a very small drop along what needs to be done. There are larger systematic issues that need to be addressed, and oil and gas needs to be part of that. The oil and gas industry in Alberta, I'm born and raised in Alberta, although I've worked many different places. It's where I make my home. And so in Alberta, we have been a leader within the nation for oil and gas. And I often refer to the safety culture as a good example of that. The oil sands came about, they really led the safety culture charge, which is to be expected. They're utilizing the world's largest equipment here in our backyard. And so of course, safety needs to be number one. But taking that same kind of mindset, oil and gas can lead change in a number of different industries, but especially amongst themselves. And it is so vital that oil and gas be engaged in this conversation because they work with the land. And for Indigenous people, land is a relation. And so you need a relationship with the land. You need to steward to it. You need to think about the sustainability of it. You need to think about the reclamation. And as Elder Evelyn had mentioned in her opening remarks, we think ahead 1,000 years. Like that is thinking ahead for where we are now and what the land looks like in 1,000 years. There's a lot that needs to be done. And so building these long-lasting, trusting relationship with the land is important, but also with Indigenous peoples and their communities. Indigenous peoples have been the original stewards of the land for many years and can speak and understand the voice of the land. They hear its cries, they hear the hurt that's there, not only with the land itself, but insect kingdom and the mineral nation and the plants and the trees, all the parts that make up that ecosystem. And because oil and gas works with land in an extractive way, there is a responsibility and accountability that's needed by industry, companies, and their leaders in order to address that. And so engaging in truth and reconciliation is something that needs to be part of it. We hear different names for environmental stewardship now. We know folks are working on climate change. Reclamation is a big thing in the oil sands, especially because of the large tailings ponds. We hear sustainability being there, and all of this is tied really to land stewardship. And so it needs to go to start a truth and reconciliation journey if an oil and gas company hasn't. It's again just so crucial because of the impact that those industries have on land, on people, on community. And these are all connected. This is the part that oil and gas really needs to understand. Land is a relation and it's connected at a level that people don't quite understand to Indigenous people. So when the land is hurt, we are hurt. And when we are hurt, the land is hurt. And we can't get to a place of healthy, we can't get to a place of vibrant without addressing these things. And so it's so important that a truth and reconciliation journey be started and it be done in a reciprocal way. And so definitely I'm excited to be part of this conversation to help foster and give some ideas of where oil and gas can move in the future and how they can be a leader amongst the industries, just like they were a leader for safety culture. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks, Carrie.
Thanks, Jessica. Some important points there. In particular, what struck me was the conversation around mindset in terms of the life cycle that we think about as non-Indigenous people or as non-Indigenous engineers. It's like a 20 to 30 lifespan of something, right? Or 40 years max, but we're talking multi-generational, 7 generations beyond that. And how does that change your planning process if you were to have a different mindset or perspective? And then the stewardship one always strikes me. An elder once said to me in a session that there's no other people in the history of the planet that have a longer relationship, positive standing, reciprocal relationship with nature and land than Indigenous people. So maybe we should take pause before we decide what we think is best for the planet. So thank you for that. Rayleen, I'm gonna go over to you as well on this one. What shift have you seen in small or large, and where do you think companies should begin if they're not yet on this path of reconciliation?
Thanks, Carrie. First of all, I want to acknowledge the beautiful opening that Elder Evelyn gifted to us today. It was wonderful. And I think I was coming from a place of a lot of anger and a lot of grief in reference to many things, but probably triggered by the findings in Kamloops a few weeks ago. So thank you for holding that space for us, Elder Evelyn. I think it's really important. For me, I left Canada. I graduated from my Bachelor of Commerce. I brought my suitcase with me to the final exam. I was gone and I was never planning to come back. I was always told by one of my mentors, Herb Belcourt, go off, get international experience, but then come back and give back to your community. And that is in essence what brought me home nearly 2 years ago. In that time, the TRC was released while I was away. I was watching it from abroad. I was working in many different places around the world. And I had the understanding that I think most countries on the global stage have, and that is that Canada is doing a good job in its treatment of Indigenous people. So when I returned in 2019, I can't find the word to describe how I felt. I felt dismayed, doesn't even begin to describe. I felt, I can't begin to tell you how wrong that feeling was. And I think that, for me, myself, spending my entire career in the energy industry, building up the experience, the skills that I needed to help our communities back here at home, and then to see the state of the energy industry and the fact that the industry is telling itself and the rest of the world that they're doing a good job and they're not, is, it shakes me to my core as an Indigenous woman with experience in finance, with experience in working with national oil companies around the world. So I think there's so much work that needs to be done. I, for one, am completely overwhelmed at points. I don't know what to do. And I've nearly left the country twice in the last 2 years because it was just too much and too large. But the thing is we have to chip away, and we have to collectively, as Indigenous people and the oil and gas industry and the Canadian public and the Canadian government, find a solution to this. You know, stop telling ourselves that it's great, you know, stop telling all of these stories in these corporate annual reports and actually put the boots on the ground to do the work. So unfortunately, there is no silver bullet. I can't offer, you know, a nice little package of solutions. But I think my message to everybody here on the call, and the message that I encourage you to take back to your companies, is that there's so much more that needs to be done, and we need to do it together in partnership and in good relation. Thank you.
Thanks, Rayleen, and appreciate sharing the perspective of being abroad and coming back to Canada. I think it would be interesting to sort of explore that a bit, because I do think we have this assumption internationally, our reputation internationally is one of deep respect for all people, of inclusiveness, of collegiality among all. And so we're a safe place, we're a polite place, we're a place where we are models and examples of the shared practices that need to be occurring around the world. But I think I myself, as a non-Indigenous person, had a similar aha moment internationally on the issue of access to safe, clean drinking water. So the coming home realization piece and realizing what's just around the corner, literally, was also eye-opening. I want to touch on the international piece too, because the footprint of oil and gas, many companies operating in a Canadian context, they're also international as well. Can you give some examples of or shared experiences that you've seen in oil and gas internationally, positive examples or examples of collaboration and engagement where you've seen industry working with Indigenous people, maybe in outside of Canadian context, Rayleen?
Yeah. So I thought a lot about this question before coming on today. And I think, you know, there is no one country that I have worked in or you know of that truly treats Indigenous people in the extractive industries the way that they need to be treated. So throughout my career, I spent some time in Indonesia looking for a small gas package. And I was on the island of Sumatra, and I learned that the government recently, like within the last 20 years, relocated entire Indigenous communities off the island to different islands and completely displaced them, so the national oil company could extract the gas resources from that area. I spent 3 years living in Ecuador, ran Native Energy, which is a social enterprise with communities down in the Amazon. And again, you know, just watching these families live right next to, you know, oil and gas production areas where there's flares going off night and day, etc. But even returning home, you know, I join you from Buck Lake, which is on Treaty 6 territory in Métis Region 4. Just down the road, we have a reserve that has, you know, it's a small place where a First Nation has winter camping and summer activities. And there's a decrepit gas plant right beside the reserve, just kitty corner. So I think, you know, I truly can't point to one country or one example internationally where I could say that, you know, this is a upstanding example. But I can share some examples of, I think, countries and the oil companies in those countries moving in the right direction. And I think we have to look at Scandinavia and even the North Sea. So, you know, the energy systems there are changing. We have these super major players becoming more environmentally focused, and you know, they're devoting incredible amounts of resource in terms of time, energy, finance to rewriting that story. And I feel like Canada is so far behind. I feel like we've adopted this ESG, which is a rebrand of CSR. You know, we need a nice 3-letter acronym to tell everybody that we're doing a good job, but yet we're not actually doing the work. So, I would really encourage the oil and gas community in Canada and specifically in Alberta to really learn from what the other majors are doing in other countries and begin to piece together their own action plan to not only operate with less of a footprint on the environment, but also, look at that in reference to Indigenous people.
Thanks, Rayleen. It's a complex, complicated question. I think we often, in a Canadian context, seek to look towards, countries like Australia that have similar colonial structures and, large areas of land where there's lots of resources and extractive industries. And I think if we look there, there's a lot of the same difficulties and push and pull with their Indigenous communities. Same, a little bit more in New Zealand, where there's been advancements in recognizing land as having rights, as being an entity, a human entity, and the recognition of the waterways there. So there has been progress in some little pieces, but again, I go back to your earlier comment about ensuring that this isn't just something that we positively report on every year as part of our corporate social responsibility statements, but it being really a meaningful look back and look forward as to what have we actually done versus what can we actually do. And it's okay to say, we have a long way to go. It's okay to say that you did your best, but it wasn't the best that you could do. It's okay to say that you've got a lot of things that you need to fix in your corporation, in your organization. So I think that was an important comment. Jessica, I want to go over to you on this piece because I believe you've worked with some of these same industries that have an international footprint. Are there some examples or experiences and shared experiences that you can speak to on this piece?
For sure. So I'd like to re-echo what Rayleen said as well, that again, Canada has this impression that we're so inclusive, we got it all fixed, but then we have our story of Indigenous people that are kind of swept under the carpet, pushed off to the side, and oh, except for that, we're really polite, we're really good, except for that, like, don't look at that, right? And the examples that you provided, Rayleen, resonate because we know when reserves were being made, they were just ad hoc moved, and sometimes not just a few kilometers over, but many kilometers over. I know there's some from Alberta that were moved all the way to Saskatchewan. It was decided ad hoc who is going to be part of what reserve, and so you're not always with your aunties and uncles and relatives. There's sometimes separation, and then large geographic separation, be controlled by Indian agents to be able to go visit your own family. And it was such a oppressive system, and it still exists today and causes its own issues. But Indigenous peoples do exist all over the world. We know that there's somewhere between 370 and 500 million Indigenous peoples in a variety of countries around the world, but most of their stories are similar to our people, that very oppressive attitudes within all the countries too. And it's very similar. It mirrors, that makes up about 5% of the world population, which mirrors what the Indigenous population here in Canada, about 5%, which means we need 95% of people to take up the calls to action with us, of settler people, of people working in oil and gas, working in industry and various, to take up that call so that we can move forward together in a reciprocal way and restore the humanity of our Indigenous peoples and the communities. From the beginning, when settlers came to Turtle Island here, Indigenous peoples were treated as things, as objects, as commodity, not human. And we are human. We are people. We're spiritual beings, and we connect with everyone else on that same spiritual level, this values level. And so when I think about the international side of things, I have not worked internationally, but what pops to mind are Scandinavia as well. They're very ahead in their equity, diversity, inclusion, the things that they put in place for work-life balance, although I don't really like that terminology, but also in their industry of setting targets for clean energy, for sustainability, for creating fair agreements between companies, as well as New Zealand comes to mind too, where a lot of the Maori tribes there do sit and have a seat at the table, in which in Canada here, we don't always have a seat at the table. So thanks for that question.
Thanks, Jessica. And I appreciate that perspective that you shared there. I think There's some important discussions to be had around some of the examples internationally, but the focus today is to sort of zero in on where we're at in a Canadian context, and going back to both of your points around the amount of work that we really need to do in this Canadian context. Let's talk a little bit about that here in Canada. What do you think the oil and gas industry can do to influence more meaningful systemic change in helping to build and foster strong relationships with Indigenous people? And in particular, what do you think the barriers are to ensuring that these aren't just tokenistic approaches? And so Rayleen, you touched a little bit on that as well, in terms of ensuring that we go above and beyond just statements, but towards actions. Jessica, I'll go to you first. What do you think are ways in which industry can be part of creating and shifting in a more meaningful way towards strong relationships with Indigenous people?
Well, definitely industry has a role to play, oil and gas industry especially here in the Western provinces, because we drive a lot of the economy out here. And we function in a capitalistic world. We function within this framework. So with this economic driver behind it, we have a chance to influence. Oil and gas has a chance to influence. We look at things like here in Edmonton, we renamed our football team from the Edmonton Eskimos to the Edmonton Elks. And that was done because the sponsor pulled out. They heavily influenced that. Would that organization have made that change without that influence? There's a good chance not, because they already tried not to. And so industry has a huge role to play in influencing change in government. And that's where a lot of change has to come at a policy level, legislation level, setting what is considered industry standard. When it comes to truth and reconciliation, industry standard is not good enough. What best practice, industry standard, like why would you want to do the minimum when it comes to truth and reconciliation? You'd want to do the maximum. You'd want to be the leader in this area. You want to be the one who knocks this out of the park and puts in place like fair and transparent impact benefit agreements. You want to put in place building long-lasting relationship with Indigenous communities before you need them, doing more than the minimum federal duty to consult, finding ways to engage with communities in a way that you give back not only in an economic way, but also on a social side. You mentioned corporate social impact, and that needs to be part of it. That companies give back and create a reciprocal kind of ecosystem almost with the communities that they touch and are influenced on. And that means working on capacity. That means working on developing our people. That means giving them a voice, but also understanding that we're all healing and that we move slower because we have large bundles to bear. I know as an Indigenous person, I do have PTSD from things that happened to me, even though I didn't grow up traditionally on a reserve. I still have, I'm still the subject of racist acts and behaviors and attitudes, and that has its toll. But yet I have to run the race, the same race everyone else does, and often run it faster and better in order to have my credibility there. And so industry needs some empathy towards our people in the communities as well. Often people will go into community and impose their time frame. We got to have it now. We got to have it now. You know, we have 30 days to get this done. But understanding that there's a reason community moves slower, and it's because of that group trauma. So when we talk about equity, this is what I challenge industry to really think about. Equity is finding the fit that works the best for that relationship, not equality. Don't expect us to run the same race. Let's find a different race. We're running the wrong race, and we need to figure out a way to work with community that hasn't been found yet, because what we have done in the past hasn't been successful. There are broken relationships. There's anger, there's mistrust, and community has a long memory because we are supported by our 7 generations. We remember what has happened 7 generations ago. And industry really, really needs to understand that it needs to be something new. And I have seen wonderful things come out of motivated industry. They invent new innovation all the time. Like I look at what's coming out in terms of technology and new approaches. If they focus their energy on truth and reconciliation, we could find a solution. I bet we could find a solution tomorrow that would be innovative and respectful and really embody that worldview difference and find a way that we can move forward together. But it needs that focus, and it needs the strong leadership in order to motivate the employees and motivate the government and to motivate everyone to look for those solutions. It is very complex in many different ways. And so it does need many brains and voices together. So thanks for that.
Thanks, Jessica.
If I might.
Yeah, go ahead, Rayleen.
If I might just follow on from Jessica. So that's, you just touched on one point that I am very passionate about, and that is holding leadership of these companies accountable. I think, you know, in my interaction in the 2 years that I've returned home, you know, I am very disappointed in the executives of many oil and gas companies and service companies in their understanding of why truth and reconciliation is important, in their understanding of why there need to be meaningful, equal partnerships with Indigenous communities, and how this will benefit their businesses. So, you know, I think we all see when there are Indigenous people on boards of crown corporations and of these energy companies. And to be honest, they're from the same handful. They're a handful of people, largely Indigenous men, who are appointed and kind of recycled. And I just, you know, I would really encourage these companies, and especially the leadership, the boards, to really think, you know, is this diverse? Is this offering a different perspective? Is this the best way? So that would be my first point. Sorry, I'm just going to go on. I have a lot to say about this. The second is we need the leadership of these energy companies to do some land-based learning. This is one of the things that I really saw in the UK. I feel like corporates in North America, and especially in Canada, they have this true disconnection to the land. You know, I would love to see these executives go out, leave their cell phone in their car or truck, and spend a couple of days with community, with elders, with people on the land, you know, fishing, collecting medicines, you know, and really understanding the ways of our people. That's the only way that things are going to change, is if they have that firsthand understanding of why we are so passionate about protecting and using, you know, not using the land, but being with the land in a meaningful way. So, you know, I would challenge the energy industry to stop taking these golf trips and spend some real time on the land with people, with Indigenous people, so that you can understand why this is so important to us and central to our being. The third point is, you know, I'm a very pragmatic person. You know, I would love to stop seeing the top line of revenues being reported when contracts are awarded to Indigenous service companies. Often these companies are a joint venture partnership, 51-49, 49 being held by a non-Indigenous entity, but these companies are reporting the top line revenue. So if you're, you know, awarding a $10 million contract for a service, that's the revenue. That doesn't even take account to the costs, the profits, and then only 51% of those profits are going back to the Indigenous individual or the community. So that has to stop. That's called window dressing. There's no need for that. And I think that is perpetuating this, I don't know, this narrative of we're doing a good job. You know, we've awarded this much in contracts, etc. Like we just need to find a different way. I could go on about this forever, so I think I'll stop there, but there is so much work to do at all levels. So I really encourage everybody to think about how they can contribute to that change. Thanks.
Thanks, Rayleen. I think the window dressing piece is a great analogy, because it's something that we see across not just the oil and gas industry, but many industries working in partnership or supposed partnership with Indigenous people. Going beyond that tokenistic piece, I often find that other non-Indigenous people come to the table with the mindset, just tell us what you want, just tell us what you want out of this, and we'll do it. Or, let's focus on solutions. Let's not talk about the past. Let's not talk about the past. Let's not talk about the past. And I think that's easy for us as non-Indigenous people to say, because that past is not something that we bear today. It's not even a past that many non-Indigenous people can connect with. But it's important that people recognize that one of the last residential schools didn't close until 1996. Many of us can't even fathom that. The policies and programs that dictate how we operate in this industry and in this country are very colonial, paternalistic policies and programs, and they require people sticking their neck out, and that's leadership who has the luxury. And what comes with leadership is responsibility, but also the luxury of being able to say, no, you need to do it this way. No, I'm going to be what stops this process and changes it going forward. So that call on leadership to really take the responsibility that comes with leadership is really, really important. So thank you both for sharing what is a difficult question to try and answer in a couple minutes. Obviously today's session, we wanted to get Indigenous women perspectives on oil and gas. And so I want to ask you both, as Indigenous women in this industry, how do you think it can be more inclusive of Indigenous ways of knowing and doing and culture and different approaches? Rayleen, I'll go to you first.
I've always wanted to say this. I've only said this to a few of my friends, but I want to say this and with this audience. It was far easier for me to be an Indigenous woman working in oil and gas in the Middle East than it is in Canada, period. I have a plethora of experience. I even came back to work on a drilling rig as a roughneck, not because I needed to, but because I wanted that experience and I wanted that view of the industry from the ground up. What I faced on that drilling rig, being the only woman in the crew, the third woman in the history of the company to work on a drilling rig as a roughneck, the one thing that I faced was not sexism, it was racism. It was drilling in an area that my family is from, and there were certain service hands and some crew members that in the beginning didn't speak to me because I was a Whitford. It wasn't because I was a woman. It wasn't because I was educated. It wasn't because I was half the size of the rest of my crew. It was because of my last name. That is a problem. And if you're encountering that at that level, imagine how difficult it's going to be for an Indigenous woman at the corporate level. I find that being back home, and this is why I nearly left twice, being here, you're seen as a barrier, as something that just needs to be dealt with, not somebody that can contribute a different point of view. You're looked at something that needs to be dealt with. And I've been in a number of meetings, not just one, but a number of meetings where, I'm sitting in the room in Calgary and I'm not even acknowledged, and I wait until the end of the meeting and finally somebody from my team asks me, do you have anything to contribute? So we don't have a voice. And I've experienced that firsthand. So that's where my anger comes and my grief is. There is so much more that needs to be done. So how can we do that? Invite us to speak, invite us to provide our views, and be ready when the message that we deliver is not an easy message to take. I think, the industry needs to recognize that there's so much more that needs to be done before they can begin to find ways to welcome experienced women, Indigenous women like Jessica and I, into their organizations or to contribute to the shaping of their organizations. Thank you.
Thanks, Rayleen. The idea that it's a problem and not an opportunity, why you have something you have to deal with and get over and, get somebody to sign an agreement so that we can be done dealing with it, rather than an opportunity to be a leader in a new way of doing things, an opportunity to learn from and arguably have a much more successful, sustainable, long-term project had, meaningful partnerships been established. The idea of pivoting the mindset to be an opportunity a tricky one for non-Indigenous people and those in leadership, because with opportunity comes the understanding that you might profit better from it. But if you can shift your understanding of what an opportunity is at the same time, and not dealing with it as a problem, I think that's a really important thing for everybody on the call to hear. Jessica, what do you think? Sort of going back to what Rayleen has just commented on around what it's like to be an Indigenous woman in oil and gas. How do you think this industry can be more inclusive?
Definitely, a lot of what Rayleen has said resonates with me for sure. I am a female Indigenous engineer, and always we already know that the oil and gas is quite paternalistic. I remember growing up and working in it and eating in the lunch shack, plastered with pornography, having to drive drunk coworkers to the strippers. You know, I've given a lot of these talks before, and one female scientist as well said, you know, she was even shot at, and that is the realistic-ism. Like, I'm not that is the realism. Sorry. And I'm not that old that this is decades ago, but it's still happening now. Like, just the attitude towards females in oil and gas is still quite hard. Being an Indigenous person, 100% that I also agree that you're not seen. We're used to be treating invisible, right? Being dismissed. And so for a long time, like that's how I thought we were supposed to act, that we're supposed to act invisible and not say anything and be quiet. And then for a long time, I thought we were supposed to blend in and try to fit, you know, be the square peg in the round hole, but that's not right either. We need to be able to show up authentically and bring our worldviews and bring our opinions to the table. And often, you know, I was often treated as a stat as well. You know, I got the check mark by my name, female, Indigenous. Okay, we got that taken care of. We got our token person, and off we go to the races. But that's not it. I am one of many very capable Indigenous people, and this is what people have to remember. We are smart. I was valedictorian. I graduated with 2 engineering degrees with distinction. I have a number of patents to my name. I was the Indigenous leader of the Alberta Chamber of Resources a couple of years ago. And I'm just one of many very capable Indigenous people. But make a spot for us at the table. Give us space to voice our opinions and give us equal opportunity to have that, but do it in an equitable framework. There are so many beautiful things from Indigenous culture that need to be learned in order to make the space inclusive. There's this idea that we already mentioned of the 7 generations, that we need to learn from the past 7 generations and consider the future next 7 generations. This idea of the 7 sacred teachings of coming together on a values level is so crucial, that we come with respect, we come with honesty and humility. The humility teaching is always missing, especially in the engineering profession, in the oil and gas industry, that we are able to say, you know what, I don't know, but let's figure it out. Or, you know what, we did that wrong last time, let's try something different this time. Or, you know, I didn't know that was racist. let me correct myself, and I apologize for that. The humility teaching is missing, and that really, really needs to be there. Females, I am blessed to be female, and that means I'm blessed to be able to bear children, and that is a great honor, and that is something that needs to be lifted up, and that is something that brings with it an ability to be in touch with my emotions, with my feelings, where relationship and building community is just ingrained in how I do things, and that is needed in industry. Relationship is key. And it's missing a lot of times, where people just don't know how to build relationships. Leaders are promoted on technical ability rather than leadership quality. And we need leaders that have leadership qualities. And that is founded in being able to communicate, being able to empathize, being able to put on different hats in order to be the voice for those who aren't at the table. And that's not only diverse people, that's also land spirit and water spirit and the environment, like the voices that aren't at the table. And these are things that we bring as female Indigenous to the table. And those are all things that are needed to make a thriving economy.
Thanks, Jessica. And thanks, Rayleen, for both of you for those comments. And I think there was a question in the Q&A that touched a little bit about what it's like to be an Indigenous woman in this industry. So thanks for sharing those perspectives. I want to shift over to the calls to action, which have become central in conversations lately since the discovery of the mass graves in Kamloops and in Brandon, Manitoba. There's now a renewed commitment to looking at those calls to action. We have a collective responsibility, and the onus really is on non-Indigenous people to show up. As Jessica, you said, 95% of us need to be walking that path and finding ways to address the calls to actions. Some of them are specific, some of them are less specific in terms of how oil and gas might find its way. Wondering if you can both speak to what you think the steps are to address the calls to action in a really meaningful way. And for the audience sake, I want to draw your attention to one call to action in particular, which is call to action 92, which relates to calling upon the corporate sector to adopt the UN Declaration as part of a reconciliation framework. It asks to apply it in its principles, its standards to corporate policy and operational activities, to involve Indigenous peoples and lands and resources, and then gets quite specific on what that might look like, including engagement, building relationships, free, prior, and informed consent before proceeding with economic development projects, ensuring Indigenous people have access to jobs, training, education opportunities in the corporate sector, and that those communities gain long-term sustainable benefits from those economic development projects. It also includes a clause to look at providing education and management and staff on the history of Indigenous people, intercultural competency and training, conflict resolution, human rights, and anti-racism training. So call to action 92 to me is quite specific and very applicable. I'm wondering what you both think about how the industry can take steps towards addressing those calls to action. Jessica, I will go to you first.
For sure. And definitely when you're reading the calls to action, don't read them literally. That's my first piece of advice. Anyone can take up the calls to action, just like anyone can lead from any position. You don't need someone to say you have the authority to lead. You can lead from any position. Same with the calls to action. You can take up your own calls to action. We're not limited by what is written in those. They're just thinking points. And just as a note on that, the calls to action, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was funded by residential school survivors, not by the government. And even that whole gesture and that whole commission itself is a good example of how industry can contribute. Use your funding and contribute to causing a ripple effect by invigorating and motivating folks to do calls to action as well. Places where industry can help. We already talked a little bit about leadership being responsible and accountable, but also industry to industry hold each other accountable. The government is not the one who's going to be holding us accountable, and neither are the regulators. Industry needs to challenge each other to do better in truth and reconciliation and call each other out in a supportive way, of course. We don't want to perpetuate anger. We want to perpetuate reciprocal positivity, of course. But even working to understand how reserves work differently, how Métis settlements work differently in their land ownership, that the community revenue isn't there because the tax model works different, understanding the challenges to community because it's complicated. We have individual trauma, which perpetuates up into community trauma. There's a lot of healing that has to be done. There's a lot of poverty cycles and social issues that result because people are hurt, they're traumatized. We need to be considerate and empathetic towards that, but also that the capability is there and that community, again, because we have work in this capitalistic world, needs to have a different approach to help contribute to better infrastructure and the boil water advisories and social issues and coming up with a way to navigate that. But again, just going back to the very foundational idea of relationship building, industry needs to build meaningful relationships before they need them, and not just the minimum duty to consult. Giving things like fair impact benefit agreements, partnering on contracts for Indigenous owned businesses, writing training into any contract that's given, even the RFP process, making sure that Indigenous communities are given priority, or that contracts in the requirements that any successful bidder has to have Indigenous capacity building as part of that. Just building things into existing frameworks is one way to do that. But again, finding that way to find a reciprocal and equitable way in partnership is so important, and believing in that capability. It's not just your designated Indigenous relations person that is responsible for this. Everybody is responsible for this. And so holding even internally your own leaders accountable, encouraging small steps. I know it may not seem like a whole lot, but land acknowledgements is a small step. Mandatory training, there's so much free training out there. Blanket exercises, the U of A, Indigenous Canada, open online course. Like there's so many resources out there now. And the pandemic has made an interesting change where a lot of elders did take to creating YouTube videos and offering their teachings in a way that they never did before. And so there is a different way to learn. But please just take the step and talk to Indigenous people, talk to community, and make a space at the table. That is definitely a very easy step to take. And I don't know why more people just don't take that step.
Thanks, Jessica. Establish relationships before you need them was the piece that really sort of struck. If I could like put that in giant bold letters, and not just go to community when you need something from them. A great point there. Rayleen, do you want to build on what Jessica said?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that Jessica said. There are so many things that can be done. I think that some things are being done, but can be done better. And I think that, you know, the oil and gas industry needs to invest the time and resources to do it properly. I also think the calls to action, you know, even 92, the one which you read, they can be overwhelming. They're complex, and you're right. If you take them literally, you risk missing the point. So what I would like to see is all organizations having a standing meeting, whether that's weekly, whether that's monthly, where they devote time and space to thinking about how they can address this. I feel like, especially in the corporate world, and especially in oil and gas, like you said, Carrie, there's this time limitation, you know, like you need to fit meetings into certain spaces. You need to look, you know, you run your energy models 20, 30 years out, nothing more than that. And I think there just needs to be time and space allocated to the TRC and how industry is going to respond. I would encourage every company, but especially oil and gas, do not bring an Indigenous person into your organization and expect them to change you. It's so hard. It's impossible, and one person can't do that by themselves. You know, as Indigenous people, we're meant to, you know, not only meet the roles and responsibilities of the normal job, but then we're asked to do so much more and so much more. And you know, I certainly currently find myself in roles where, you know, I'm asked to do work that is far beyond what would be expected of the specific role, and to do it in a way that, you know, will make change happen really quickly. And it's not reasonable. It's not reasonable. You can't change something outside of yourself. The collective need to come in and do that together. And the third point is no golf trips. I I remember being at the university, and they told us in our bachelor's, you know, oh, you should take golf lessons. Everybody does deals on the golf course. That is so North American. That is so patriarchal. I have such an issue with the golf industry. That's colonial. Go out on the land with Indigenous people, smoke some fish, you know, and enjoy your time together in a natural setting. You don't need a pair of golf clubs or whatever you call them to do that. You know, that's available, and that's a wonderful thing that people from other countries, you know, love to experience. So just take that opportunity, please. No more golfing.
I think there's no better place to end this conversation than on no more golfing for everybody. But some important pieces there around what's really important, what really matters, and being ready to really drive meaningful change in your organization, and moving beyond notional acknowledgement of Indigenous people means doing business in a different way, and not the way that it's always been done. So Thank you both for sharing that. There's a lot of questions in the chat. We've touched on a few of them here and there. I think it's driving a need for a second fireside chat where we can just explore them in a little bit more detail. But I just want to thank you both for sharing your perspectives on what is a very difficult conversation that many people have come to the table at different levels of openness to have this conversation. And so thanking both of you for being willing to share those perspectives, as difficult as they are to share at times to an audience that you cannot see and cannot gauge their reaction. And so I'm also thanking the audience for listening in and being open-minded and inclusive in the way that in which they've shared their questions and shared their comments in the Q&A. So thank you both. Any final comments from both you, Jessica or Rayleen, before I pass it back to Leah?
It's just an honor and a privilege always to sit with Elder Evelyn Day and to speak alongside yourselves, Rayleen and Carrie. So thanks again for this opportunity, and I'm glad folks are engaging in the conversation because everyone needs to engage in the conversation.
Thanks, Jessica. Rayleen?
Yeah, I wanted to just echo my thanks for Elder Evelyn and holding this really important space for us. And to Jessica, I met Jessica 18 years ago when I was a high school student. I job shadowed her. She was the first Indigenous professional I had ever met in my life. And that experience certainly gave me the confidence that I needed to get an education and to go abroad. So thank you, Jessica, for the work that you're doing. It's so important. It's changing lives. And I hope to continue on that work as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Rayleen. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it back to Leah now to close us off. I want to first also say, or lastly say, that you've heard some really important perspectives and some shared experiences and lived experiences, and I hope that you can take that back, that you can think about it, especially today of all days, but not just today, going forth and meaningfully incorporating some of these pieces into what you're doing. It doesn't matter what stage of career you're at, you always have the ability to impact and impart change if you really want to. So to my fellow non-Indigenous colleagues listening on to today's webinar, listen, learn, make space, and then do act. Get ready to really make some changes here, because we are at the cusp of meeting a lot of non-Indigenous advocates and allies to champion this forward. So thank you so much for providing some really valuable ways in which we might tangibly start to move this forward. And thank you all for listening. I'm going to throw it back to Leah. Leah?
Thank you, Carrie. And thank you so much to Jessica and Rayleen for this powerful conversation that was also, had us laughing at times as well. No more golf is definitely going to be there. But truly, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. And thank you so much, Elder Evelyn, for being here through all of this. It's really meaningful to us. A really heartfelt thank you to you all. We hope that our audience, thank you for joining us, takes your insights to heart today and moves forward in a good way, thinking about the future of oil and gas in Alberta and internationally in the ways that you're suggesting. For each of you, and thank you, we have a blanket that we will be sending to you, which is so strange in the world of Zoom. Even though it's quite warm out, it's always cold at night here. So we hope that we can help keep you warm. And thank you again, Elder Evelyn. We hope you have received the gifts that we offer you for joining us today. We so appreciate your support. And I will pass it over to you for the closing.
Thank you. Beautiful, ladies, beautiful. My heart to yours. I always wanted to go golfing, and then I went golfing once, and then I had to go to physio, and he says, no more golfing. So you're right, no more golfing. And I understand what golfing has done. I would like to just give you my opinion, if you people don't mind. When you walk with our people, heal that look in your eyes of how you walk with our women. Our women are sacred. Don't look at us as we're somebody that you can just use and just misuse. Please look at us as strong, wisdom with us, and not to be taken advantage of. What you do with the earth is how you try to walk with us as women. No more. That is not allowed. Understand that when you are digging in Mother Earth, you don't rape her. You don't take everything and then cover up and make it look good. Oh, it looks great, but it's not. Before you even do that, understand that when you make a decision, you make it so you don't shame your women, your children, because it's on you. It is not on us. Because we come from our heart spiritually to tell you, go the other way so that you don't disturb the animals, so that you don't poison the water, so that you don't walk in a way to have us move to different areas. That's not respect. That's not being humble. That is not being a human being. That is being greedy. That is being walking with us without a heart, without the truth of who you really are. You are a human being, so are we. Walk with us in that way and walk with Mother Earth that way, so that that shame don't fall back on you and your children and your grandchildren and your daughters. Because if you hurt the Indigenous people, it comes back to your people. Your government has taught that, and they have hurt your people and continue for greed and money. Let us walk with each other in a good way towards our women, towards all women and men, because they are our leaders. When you are a leader of anything, your profession, in any association, you have to know that you can make a difference. You can turn that around and make it a good way if your heart is right. That's how we walk. No more divisions amongst our people. Corporations come in, they grab the ones that just want money, go that way, break everybody up. You walk in with us, you look at all of us. You just don't go to the ones that are going to end up hurting and end up harming themselves and their people. That is what needs to be talked about. I come to you from our ancestors because I know their cries. I saw them and I cried the same way. Don't divide our people anymore. Oil and gas don't. Corporations don't do that anymore. Let's walk in a good way. We open our hearts, and when I come as an elder, I come with the Creator, Mother Earth, the Great Spirit, and the Great Mystery, and my friend Jesus' story. That's the only way I come, because it blesses. It teaches me to honor. It teaches me to follow the 7 sacred teachings. And it teaches me to understand my friend Jesus' story. Christianity is about power and money. My friend Jesus' story is about peace, love, joy, all that it brings to us. So we walk, and they walk together in a good way. It never discriminates. Systemic racism, when the women come and I hear the women, systemic racism, understand how you were born in it and how you walk with it and change that. Action tells us that your heart has changed, and you keep that action all through your life. If I'm doing something wrong and Jessica comes to me and she tells me, even I'm an elder, she tells me because she is learning and she's one too, I will have to change my action. No more. And I do the same with her and she changes her action. That is how we walk. We don't see action. We hear words, but no action. So learn to walk with yourself spiritually, because if you do, you will know how to walk with others. Why I say that? Because I walk spiritually and I know how to walk with others. And I want change. The old people always say, you come. There's a time when your generation, that everything's going to fall apart. When that happens, do not do what they did to us. That spirit has to stop. The discrimination, systemic racism, dividing our people. You don't need to be divided either. One church can't talk to the other church, you fight. Oh, it breaks my heart. That's not the story of my friend Jesus. That's not how you walk. So you have to understand the underline of the spirituality of how that is part of Pharaoh's way. Do not follow Pharaoh. Follow the story and change, because we can. So could you. No more not being honest with ourselves. Understand how you walk with the land. You have taken everything from her, and you have hurt so many people. Corporations, don't be that kind of leader. I'm not saying pointing fingers, sorry. I'm saying don't be that kind of corporation. When people come on our land, they tell us everything, and we want to make the difference. Then we get nothing. Don't be that kind of a leader. You are better than that. Every human being is a spiritual person, and they don't discriminate. Don't. Because when someone comes to me and they talk to me and I go, oh, even my people, I go, oh no, that's not right. Their heart, they're broken because of the genocide they went through. And they make wrong decisions for the people. Come to all the people. Don't divide. I come to you not to divide you. I come so that we can walk the spiritual way and understand so that we make a difference. Mother Earth will have a hole all over. Your beef will die. And you want moose meat and you want to walk on the land. It's going to be all full of holes. Is that what you want to teach your children? Look at what the money I made, but look at the holes on Mother Earth. Your kids won't be able to eat. Just like our children. So let's not make that mistake anymore. We honor our women. We honor our men. Walk with us that way. Help us. by not dividing us. You talk to all the people when you come on the land. The old people will tell you, go over here, even though it is harder, but put that over there so that you don't disturb the animals. Mother Earth gave that to us for a reason, for us to feed and to live. Don't take that away from us, because we're not going to have all that on here. There's so much changes, and we have to understand the change on Mother Earth and what we are doing so that we can make a change altogether. I thank you for listening. I'll pass it over to Jessica. My heart to yours.
Thank you for your words and your thoughts, Elder Evelyn. So I will light the closing smudge here to again set folks on their way in a good way, and I hope you stay for the sharing talking circle afterwards as well. So I have some new sage in here that I'm going to just light. So I take these thoughts. I hope that everyone leaves this circle with their eyes open and their ears open, that we can find a way to speak together, and that we can find a way to really process our thoughts and feelings on this and find the motivation to take that first step or continue walking on the truth and reconciliation path, that we really see each other now, and that we come together in a respectful way, and that we make some real action and some real change, because there's still so many people in pain and so many people suffering and so many people who are healing. And I hope we see that we are all one community and that we can come together on this. So thank you. I'm so grateful for Elder Evelyn and Dave for joining us, for the opportunity again to come and speak, to sit alongside with Rayleen and Carrie. And I just want to offer again thoughts of gratitude and prayers out to all of you, that this finds you safe and healthy. Back to you, Elder Evelyn, please.
Creator, Mother Earth, Great Spirit and Great Mystery, and my friend Jesus' story. We left our spirits and ourselves up to you, and thank you for your wisdom and your blessings. And thank you for allowing us to be in the circle of your love and the wisdom. Bless each and every one that was here in the circle. And we thank you, Mother Earth, for giving the gifts you've given us. Giving us the strength as women to walk together and to honor you and to honor Creator, how you work together. And how my friend Jesus works together too, without discriminating, without hurting each other. Let us walk that way. Teach us how to walk that way. We left systemic racism up to you. They were born in it, and we ask to have it to be removed, so they be better business people, better leaders, so they honor each other. They honor the women and they honor the men. And they walk together like you have put us on this earth to do. We ask this and we left this up to you. We ask that you remove all the culture differences, to understand it, to respect it, and to remove it in an unhealthy way, that they carry it in systemic racism and racism. We'd ask that we left that up to you and ask that you heal it. Be with everyone. We thank you for allowing them to be with us and to stay with us and be with their loved ones, be with all our people, their healing, and with all the hurt. We left it up to you and leave it in your hands. And we just thank you for everything that you've given us and the opportunity to speak and be together. Thank you for Jessica, Rayleen, Carrie, all of them. Bless them and be with them as they walk as leaders to make a difference. We thank you for everything. Medu, I, Amen, Mekwich. Medu.